I grew up in the kind of town people only remember when they're trying to forget it. My high school sat at the edge of town, surrounded by pine trees so dense they swallowed sound. You could stand behind the building on a foggy morning and hear nothing, no birds, no cars, not even the wind, just the sound of your own breath. That's where it started. I was 17, a senior, and already halfway gone counting the days until I could leave that place. I rode bus 22 every morning and every afternoon without thinking. Same driver, same route, same creaky door and faint smell of diesel and chewing tobacco. But there was one day. The day everything changed. It was October. Thick gray clouds hung low, and the air had that heavy stillness that sometimes comes before a thunderstorm. The morning had passed like usual first period, second, then the dragging crawl of third and fourth. I remember staring at the clock in biology, tapping my pencil like a nervous metronome, wishing for time to move faster, that by the time the final bell rang, I was practically out the door. BOF 22 always waited in the second row of the parking lot near the trees. Mr. Kessler, the driver, was a former mechanic with deep lines in his face and a voice like gravel. He never talked much, just nodded when you stepped on and nodded again when you stepped off. But that afternoon, Mr. Kessler wasn't in the driver's seat. The bus door hissed open as I approached, and I remember this so vividly it still makes my stomach twist. The air that poured out from inside was cold. Not air-conditioned cold, wrong cold, like stepping into a basement that hadn't been opened in years. And there was someone else in the seat. Man thin, wearing the uniform, sure, but it didn't fit quite right. The hat sat too low over his face, and his hands were pale, like gray pale, and I remember thinking they didn't match the tone of his voice when he greeted me. Afternoon, kid. Something about it was off. A little too cheery, a little too smooth, but I was tired, and everyone else was already boarding, so I didn't say anything. Just walked down the aisle and found my usual spot, third row from the back, next to the window. I plugged in my headphones, rested my head, and waited for the usual bumps and rattles of the route, but they never came. The bus drove, it moved, I could feel it in the subtle shifts of gravity, the way my shoulder leaned slightly as we turned, but it was smoother, quieter, no chatter from the kids, no engine rumble. Just the soft hum of motion and the occasional tap of something brushing against the bus windows. It took me longer than it should have to realize we weren't going the right way. Our route usually passed the water tower. I always saw it on my left, a dull silver cylinder rising above the trees. But this time, we were surrounded by forest on both sides. Trees so tall they seemed to bend inward, like they were leaning in to listen. I pulled out my earbuds and looked around. That's when I noticed it. No one was talking, no one was even moving. They all sat, perfectly still, 30 teenagers, slumped in their seats, eyes open but unblinking, faces pale, lips barely parted, like wax statues. Mid-breath, I whispered, "Guys, nothing, not even a twitch." I stood up slowly, heart thudding in my chest, and walked down the aisle. I waved my hand in front of Sarah Lou's face. Nothing. Tapped Trevor on the shoulder. His skin was ice cold. He didn't even flinch. I turned to the front. The driver. He was humming. A slow, tuneless hum. His head tilted slightly, and from the back, I could see one long, white ear twitching slightly under the hat, like it was listening for something. "Where are we going?" I asked. He didn't respond, just kept humming. I raised my voice. "Hey, this isn't the route." He finally turned to look at me, and I swear to whatever's listening, his face wasn't human. It was, but it wasn't. The proportions were off. Eyes too wide, mouth stretched just a bit too far. And his skin. It wasn't skin. It was like it had been painted on, loosely fitted, too thin. "We're going where we're needed," he said softly, and then he smiled. I backed up, stumbled into an empty seat, and tried to pull out my phone. No signal, of course. I tried to open the window, locked. I banged on the glass. No one even flinched. The forest outside was getting denser. The light was dimming. Shadows fell in thick waves across the seats. And that's when the bus began to sink. Not literally, not like into water or the ground. It was more like the road was tilting, descending gradually into some kind of hollow space below the trees. The shadows stretched longer. The hum of the engine changed pitch. It sounded deeper now, wet, like something breathing. I panicked, ran to the front and grabbed the wheel. The driver didn't fight me, just let go. let his hands drop into his lap like he was done. I pulled hard to harden the bus, veered violently to the left. We crashed through the brush, bounced off a small embankment, and came to a stop against a tree. Steam hissed from the front, and just like that, it was silent. The driver was gone. I mean gone. No open door, no footsteps, just vanished. Everyone on the bus, still sitting perfectly still. Then, one by one, they started to wake up, blinking, stretching, confused. No one remembered anything. They all thought we were still on the normal ride home. They had no memory of the forest, the road, the humming, nothing. They found us 2 hours later, in a clearing 3 miles off the main road. No driver, no explanation. Mr. Kessler, he'd called in sick that morning. He never knew what happened. And bus 22, they retired it that week, claimed the damage was too costly. But every now and then, late at night, I hear that same humming in my dreams, and sometimes I wonder if we ever really got off that bus, or if part of us is still riding it, deeper into the woods, deeper into something waiting just beyond the edge of the map. We weren't supposed to be at the school that late. That was our first mistake. It was the Friday before winter break, and we were all buzzing, half from caffeine, half from being 16 and bored and too stupid to know better. The plan was simple: sneak into the gym after hours, light up the sound system, and throw an unofficial Screwfunnels party. No adults, no rules, just booze, music, and a chance to feel like kings for one night. But when Jake's cousin who had the key bailed last minute, the whole thing fell apart. Some of us stayed anyway. Me, Jake, Riley, and Cam. We ended up hanging around the back parking lot, the one behind the cafeteria that backs up to the woods. No one ever goes there after dark. It's where the retired buses sit. Old, rusting hulks with peeling paint and deflated tires. I always found it creepy, like a graveyard for yellow skeletons. Jake wanted to shoot a stupid TikTok. Something about sneaking onto one of the old buses, turning on a flashlight, and pretending we were being haunted. Typical Jake stuff. He loved that fake horror crap. But the bus we found wasn't one of the old ones. I noticed it right away. It was parked in the back row, separate from the others, clean to clean. The yellow paint was fresh, almost wet-looking in the moonlight. Numbered, rust, no graffiti. The windows were tinted so dark they looked black. Cam squinted at it. That one's not usually here. Probably a spare. Jake shrugged. Come on, let's check it out. I hesitated. The air around it felt off still, like even the wind didn't want to go near it. But Riley was already climbing the steps. The bus door opened with a hiss, like it had been waiting. That sound, it wasn't mechanical. It was softer, almost wet. We climbed inside. The interior was spotless. No dust, no trash, no gum stuck under the seats. Everything was pristine, like it had just rolled out of a factory. But it didn't feel new. It felt empty, like something had scrubbed it too hard, like it had been sanitized of life. Jake flicked on his phone light, laughing. Man, this is perfect. Get this angle. Riley looked scared or something. Didn't laugh. I kept looking at the seats. Each one was numbered. That wasn't unusual. But the numbers weren't sequential. They weren't even logical. 3, 7, 1841, 6, 99, random, scattered numbers, all hand-painted in the same dull black ink. Some numbers repeated, some were crossed out, like someone had tried to erase them but failed. I ran my fingers over one. It felt wet, like it had just been painted. Then, something banged from the back of the bus. We all jumped. Jake spun his light toward the rear. Nothing. Probably a raccoon, he muttered. But we all heard it again. Louder, closer, like something moving seat to seat, dragging its weight. Slow, deliberate. Then, the lights turned on. Not Jake's phone. The overhead bus lights, light, white, cold, flickering. Riley screamed and stumbled backward into a seat. Jake's phone died. Not just the light. The whole thing black screen, unresponsive. Cam's too. And mine. Every screen dead at the same time. Then we heard the door hissed shut. We ran to the front, but the door was sealed. Jake slammed his shoulder into it. Nothing. It didn't even rattle. The bus began to vibrate, not like an engine starting up, more like a sound you feel in your teeth, a deep, humming resonance, low and wrong. The windows started to steam up from the inside. Then, we started moving. I watched, stunned, as the trees outside began sliding past the windows. The parking lot lights faded, And beyond that just woods, endless, dense forest I knew wasn't behind the school. It never had been. We should have passed the highway in a minute, but it never came. Jake pounded on the driver's partition. No response. Cam tried the emergency exit in the back. Sealed. Then we heard the whispers. Dozens of them. Male, female, childlike, elderly, all overlapping, all wrong, like they were speaking in reverse. And then the laughing started, not happy laughter, not even insane laughter. It was mocking, hungry. I turned toward the center island. That's when I saw it. A shadow, tall and impossible, moving between the seats toward us. No face, no details, just the vague outline of someone as black as oil, its body shifting unnaturally, jerking like a puppet half submerged in water. It reached out and I swear its hand was longer than it should have been. 5 fingers, but each stretched like rubber. It grazed the back of Jake's neck. He collapsed, no scream, no twitch, just fell. We dragged him to a seat and backed away. Riley was sobbing. Cam had his eyes shut, whispering to himself. I sat there, heart thudding, watching the thing slither back into the dark, and then the lights flicked off again. Silence. Jake gasped awake. He looked around, blinking. Where the hell are we? He didn't remember the shadow, or the bus, or the party. The door hissed open again. We were back. Same parking lot, same night, but everything felt thinner, like the world around us was a copy, printed 1 layer too shallow. We got out, dragging Jake between us. He was weak but okay. We didn't say anything until we were halfway home, and then Cam whispered, "Did you see the numbers?" We all had. Every one of our seats had a number. Jake sat a 99, the same one that had been crossed out before we boarded. I didn't tell anyone this, not then, but when I looked back at the bus before we ran, there were new numbers. 4 of them, in fresh black ink. Mine, Jake's, single quotes S. Cam, single quotes S. Riley, single quotes S. Like it was waiting. When I first took the job as a substitute bus driver in 2019, I figured it'd be a decent gig. I had just lost my job at a warehouse, had no college degree, and a buddy of mine told me his district needed fill-in drivers desperately. I passed the training, got certified, and started working the next week. Most routes were up kids in the morning, drop them at Greystone Elementary, then do the reverse in the afternoon. That routine lasted about 3 weeks. Then I was called in to cover a route no one else wanted. Route 87. Dispatch was vague, just that the usual driver had called out indefinitely, and the route had been passed around like a hot potato since no one stuck with it for more than 2 days. The woman handing me the keys, Cheryl, seemed almost apologetic. "It's probably nothing," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Just follow the manifest. Don't engage if the kids say anything weird. They tend to mess with subs, right? Just kids being kids," I told myself. The route started just outside of town, looping through a series of back roads and mobile home parks, mostly quiet, rural areas. A little eerie in the fog of early morning, but nothing unusual. I got there early, climbed into bus number 2167, and began my pre-check. That's when I noticed something odd. Seat 12 was gone. I mean completely removed, like someone had unscrewed the bolts from the floor. There were still impressions where the feet had been, but no actual seat, and the space around it looked burned, like something had scorched the metal, melted the paint, and left black streaks on the wall beside it. I stared at it for a good minute before shaking it off. Maybe it was damaged, maybe they removed it for repair. No big deal. Then the kids got on. They were quiet, not rowdy like I expected, just solemn, all of them. Most didn't talk at all. A few offered half-hearted smiles. One little girl near the front, maybe 7 or 8, stared at me the entire time I was driving, and every single one of them avoided seat 12. They didn't just skip it, they physically leaned away from the gap, like it was toxic. Finally, I asked, "Hey, why is that seat gone?" The bus got dead silent. The little girl whispered, "Because it took the last driver." I laughed awkwardly. "You mean he quit?" "No," she said. "It took him." I dropped them off at Greystone without incident, but the entire rest of the day, that empty space burned in the corner of my vision. I could feel it behind me as I drove like an open mouth, wide and patient. The afternoon pickup was worse. It started when I turned onto Hemlock Road near the woods. I swear, The air inside the bus changed, heavier, like stepping into a room where someone had just been crying. You could feel it in your teeth, in your spine. And then I saw something in the mirror. Seat 12 still empty, but now there was a shape in the window next to it. A reflection dot, except there was no one sitting there. I blinked hard, looked again, nothing. Kids were quiet again. Too quiet. Finally, one boy in the back mumbled something. I leaned over. What was that? He stared out the window. You're not supposed to look at it when it's hungry. I laughed again, a little shakier this time. Is that another joke? He didn't laugh. Then I saw it again. The reflection. This time clearer. It looked like a girl, pale face, hollow eyes, just sitting there beside the missing seat. Her skin gray, almost bluish, lips slightly parted, like she was whispering, but her mouth wasn't moving. I slammed the brakes. The bus skidded to a stop in the middle of the road. Kids shouted. One of them screamed. I turned around, but seat 12 was empty. One of the boys near the middle, tall, maybe in 5th grade, stood up, pale as paper. You saw her, he whispered. I didn't answer, because I had. That night I called Cheryl. She didn't pick up. The next morning I was back on Route 87. Same bus, same seat, missing, same dread in my stomach. I considered quitting. I had half a mind to just toss the keys in the lot and drive home. But then I saw the kids waiting at the first stop, bundled up in the frost, staring at me with those tired, too knowing eyes. I couldn't leave them, so I drove by the 3rd stop. Something was different. The seat was back. No, not exactly. There was a seat there, but it wasn't right. The upholstery was darker, older, like it had been pulled from a junkyard, and the number tags said 12, except the 2 was upside down, and the paint was red. It almost looked like it had been scrawled in blood. I didn't say a word. None of the kids sat there. They still avoided it, but this time, when I checked the mirror, she was sitting there, the dead girl, staring straight ahead, only now she wasn't transparent. She looked solid. I don't remember the rest of that drive. I just remember dropping them off and getting off the bus, shaking, drenched in cold sweat. Told Cheryl I couldn't drive Route 87 anymore. She didn't argue. She just said, you lasted longer than most. 2 weeks later, I got curious. I looked up bus #2167. It had been decommissioned 3 years prior, burned. The report was vague, but it mentioned an electrical fire. Driver was found charred, slumped over the wheel. Nobody ever figured out how the fire started. A child had been missing that day. A girl who wasn't supposed to be on the bus. Her name, Emily Rourke. 7 years old, vanished. Never found. Last seen getting on Route 87. I still drive buses. Different routes, different towns. But sometimes, when I turn to Foss, when the sun's at just the wrong angle, I see a reflection in seat 12, and it's her, still waiting, still whispering, still hungry. I used to think ghost stories were just tales old drivers told to freak out the rookies. You know, urban legends, creepy school buses, phantom passengers, that kind of thing. But then came Route 42B. I was a dispatcher for a mid-sized school district in eastern Pennsylvania. I'd been doing it for about 6 years when the 42B incident happened, and trust me, I had seen everything. Drunk parents, runaway kids, drivers caught sleeping in the lot, to name it, but never this. It started with a call at 6:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. The voice on the other end was Shecky Pinect. Dispatch, this is bus 519. I think I took a wrong turn. I checked the screen. Bus 519 was assigned to Route 36, not for to be 519. Say again. There was construction, orange barrels. I was told to detour. The signs said for to be. I paused. My monitor didn't show any construction on his route, and we didn't have a 4 to be. Our routes were numbered consecutively 41, 42, 43. Nothing with letters. Where exactly are you? There was static. Then I think I'm on Holtner's Run. But the trees, they're not right. Now, I know Holtner's Run. It's a narrow, wooded back road, barely wide enough for a bus. But there hadn't been a detour through there in years. I clicked into the GPS tracking. Bus 519 was gone. Not offline, not frozen, just missing. No ping, no signal. I called back. No answer. I assumed it was a glitch. Told myself maybe the driver took a turn too fast and the system bugged out. I dispatched another bus to handle Route 36 and logged it as a mechanical delay. That should have been the end of it, but 519 showed up again, at 3:09 p.m., parked in the lot, idling, lights on, no one inside. The cameras on board had been running. I watched the entire recording later that night. The morning started normal. The driver, Kyle, loaded the kids, 12 students in total. Laughter, backpacks slung across seats, the usual chaos. Then came the fork in the road, and the sign. I paused the footage. There it was. Clear as day. An orange construction sign, detour route for 2. It looked new, clean, no rust, no graffiti, no listing in any construction record I checked afterward. Kyle took the turn. Big mistake. From there, the woods started changing. Branches curved overhead like ribs. The sunlight dimmed. Shadows got thicker. And then, one by one, the kids stopped talking. At 7:21 a.m., one little boy, a 4th grader, stood up and pointed toward the front. "There's someone in the road," he said. The camera didn't see anything. Kyle slowed the bus, then stopped. I swear to God, the next frame of the footage skipped. There was a flicker of black, like something passed across the lens. Then the boy who had been standing was gone. Just gone. His backpack was still in the aisle. The rest of the kids were crying now. One girl curled under her seat. Another tried to open the emergency exit, but the handle snapped clean off. The trees outside got closer, pressed right against the windows. And then came the whispers. No source, just audio, soft murmuring. Like dozens of voices all layered at once. The camera began to fuzz, and then they vanished, all of them gone. The bus drove another 6 minutes, completely empty, then pulled into the district lot, as if nothing had happened. We called the state police. They found nothing wrong with the vehicle, no traces of the students, no Kyle. The GPS unit was fried like something had melted it from the inside. When we reviewed the footage again later, the sign was gone. No detour. No for to be. No for to be. Just a clean stretch of road. 3 weeks later, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single photo, old, yellowed, faded, like it had sat in a drawer for years. It showed a school bus, not ours, an older model maybe, from the 1960s, parked in front of a wooded trail, the route number on the sign above the windshield. For to be. Written in crooked hand-painted numbers. In the background, almost hidden in the trees, were children. Faces pale, eyes dark. Watching. I don't dispatch anymore. I took a job doing logistics for a warehouse, quiet, safe, no kids. But sometimes, when I drive near Holtner's Run, I see orange signs in the fog. Just for a second, and I don't look twice. Not anymore. I don't talk about my time driving bus 311 anymore, not since that year. But if you're asking for true haunted school bus stories, then this one needs to be told. Back in 2012, I worked the outer route of a small district in northern Minnesota. Snow came early, roads stayed iced through April. We were understaffed, underpaid, and constantly dealing with kids who didn't want to be there. I didn't mind though. The kids were decent, and the solitude of the road calmed me. My route stretched far up, through the wooded outskirts and down toward an old mill town that barely qualified as inhabited. I picked up no more than 15 students, most of them high schoolers. Everything was routine, until November 3rd. That's when passenger 47 got on my bus. I remember the exact day because I had just gotten my snow tires installed, and it was my first drive of the season with ice on the roads. When I pulled up to the last stop on Marnie Creek Road, a house I knew was vacant, I saw a figure waiting, a tall, thin girl in a dark blue coat. She had no backpack, just stood there staring straight at the ground. Her breath didn't fog in the air. I assumed it was a mistake, maybe someone's cousin or a neighbor waiting for a ride. But when I opened the doors, she stepped on silently and walked straight to the back row without looking at me or anyone else. No eye contact. No question. Just sat down. Seat 47. Now, let me explain something. Our buses didn't have seat numbers posted, but the transportation system did count and map seats for records. Each row on the left had 2 seats, and the right side had 3. Buff 311 had 24 rows total. That's 48 seats. She sat in the very back corner, left side. Seat 47, that matters later. The first day, the other kids didn't notice her, or pretended not to. But the second morning, something was different. It started with the air. Even with the heat on full blast, the back of the bus was freezing. I checked the vents, nothing wrong. Third day there was a smell, rotten, damp, like mildew soaked in kerosene. Assumed maybe a kid spilled something or wore wet boots. I scrubbed the mats. Nothing helped. On the fourth morning, I finally asked, "Hey, did any of you notice that new girl? The one sitting in the back?" The bus went quiet. Then a boy Nathan spoke up. "There's no girl in the back." I glanced. In the mirror, seat 47 was occupied. The girl was there, staring forward, pale hands folded neatly in her lap. "You don't see her?" I asked. They shook their heads. Every single one of them. Not a hint of sarcasm. Just quiet, confused denial. That night, I reviewed the bus cam. Nothing. The footage skipped at row 24. Every day, 4 seconds of static. Then it resumed like normal. But I could see her with my own eyes. Every ride, every morning, every afternoon. And then, she started changing. Week 2 her coat was soaked, even when it didn't rain. Week 3 her hands got darker, like they were bruising. Week 4 she smiled, at me for the first time. A wide, broken smile. Her teeth weren't right. Too many, all crooked and sharp like splinters. I nearly swerved into a ditch when I saw it in the mirror, and I swear to why, didn't imagine this. She whispered my name. I tried to report it, but what do you say? "Hey, there's a ghost girl on seat 47 and the camera's skipping the footage." They'd write me up, so I kept quiet. I started wearing a rosary. I played upbeat music. I tried to pray, though I hadn't done that in years. Didn't help. She began appearing in my dreams. Always the same, setting the bus. Alone, at night, all the windows covered in frost. And her, slowly walking down the aisle toward me, step by step. One time, I woke up with 3 scratches across my shoulder, like fingernails. My fiancé thought it was from our dog, but we didn't have a dog. By December, I started counting heads obsessively. Every time I stopped, I scanned the seats. I knew the kids by name, all 15, but the count kept coming up 16. Even when they got off at the school, 15 kids walked down the steps. One always stayed behind, watching, waiting. That's when I asked our school secretary to pull the Rossages to make sure I wasn't missing someone. She looked confused. "There are only 15 on your route." She even showed me the printed list. But underneath that, in pencil, was one more name, lightly scribbled in faded handwriting. "Sylvia Marin, seat 47. I froze. I had never mentioned the seat, not once. "Who added this?" I asked. She shrugged. "No idea. But that name Sylvia." She paused, then got pale. "What? I think I've seen that name before." She disappeared into the archives. Came back 10 minutes later with a brittle, yellowed folder, a district record from 1978. Students. Marin had gone missing on her school bus during a snowstorm. The bus was found abandoned on a back road, doors open, engine running. No students inside. No driver either, but the logs said Sylvia had boarded that day, seat 47. I quit 2 days later, turned in my badge, handed off my keys. Didn't wait for the holidays, but the day I left, my final run, I saw something that's haunted me ever since. As the last student stepped off at the school and I turned onto the empty return road, I glanced back one last time. Seat 47 was empty. For the first time in weeks, no girl. No coat. No smile. Just an empty vinyl seat and a smear of black water pooled where she used to sit. And pressed against the fogged back window was AHANDPRINT. Small. Wet. Dripping down the glass. It's been 13 years. I've never driven a bus again, but sometimes, when I ride the Greyhound or take public transit, I glance to the back. And if I ever see seat 47 occupied, get off. No matter where we are, because some passengers never left, and some buses never stop collecting them. I never planned on becoming a bus driver. I was a second-year teaching assistant, barely scraping by, when the district offered me the morning and afternoon route after the regular driver retired unexpectedly. They said it was temporary, just until they hired someone new. I figured the extra pay would help cover my student loans, so I said yes. What I didn't know then, what no one told me, was why the old driver really left, and why no one in the district had driven Buff 209 twice. That's the one they gave me, a rust-red Bluebird model from the 1980s, no air conditioning, brakes that squealed in protest, and seatbelts that had long since vanished beneath torn vinyl. It had this smell like old plastic, mold, and cigarette ash that clung no matter how much I cleaned out. My first morning on the job, I stepped onto bus 209 in the depot parking lot before sunrise. The sky was slate gray, the kind of cold silence only winter mornings know. As soon as I turned the key in the ignition, the bus rumbled to life like it had been holding its breath for years. Everything was quiet until the heater kicked on, and the radio started by itself. No one had touched the dial, but there it was static, rising and falling like someone breathing through the speakers. Then faint, distant voices began to whisper through the noise. I couldn't make out words, only fragment stones more than speech, like a crowd murmuring far away. I turned it off, but the moment I pulled out of the depot and onto Route 6, the radio turned itself back on. This time, I yanked the fuse from the panel. Static gone. Problem solved. Or so I thought. The kids were mostly quiet. A few high schoolers up front, middle schoolers mid-bus. No one sat past the 20th row, ever. One boy, Marcus, told me casually, no one goes to the back. It's got the bad mirror. I asked him what he meant. He just shook his head. You'll see. That afternoon, I finally looked. The rearview mirror above the back rows wasn't like the others. Most were the wide, fisheye types for viewing all the kids. But this one was different. Oval, narrower. And it wasn't a modern reflective mirror. It was old glass, warped and silvered like the kind in antique vanities. It didn't just reflect the seats, it reflected more than it should. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but when I stared into it, the bus behind me didn't match what I saw with my eyes. In the mirror, the bus was full. Every row, dozens of kids. Silent. Still. Staring forward. Some were gray, some were gone, entirely just hollow impressions where features should be. I blinked, and the mirror cleared. The bus was empty again. I tried not to look after that, kept my eyes low, focused on the road, but the mirror was always there, pulling at me, and sometimes, even when I didn't look, I'd feel someone watching from the back. You know that sensation, when you just know something is behind you. It clung to me no more with each ride. On the third week, I dropped off my last student near an old farmhouse at the end of the route. As I rounded a sharp curve, headed back to the depot, the engine sputtered, then died. I coasted to the shoulder and hit the hazards. Phone, dead. No signal. Of course. I got out to check the engine, and when I closed the hood, I heard the sound of footsteps inside the bus. Shifting feet. Then, soft laughter. I whipped open the doors. Empty. The cabin was completely still. Except for one thing. The rearview mirror was fogged over. A single, child-sized handprint streaked the center. I slept poorly that night. Dreamed of rows and rows of children with waxy skin, their heads tilting as I passed, whispering behind clenched teeth. In the dream, I looked into the rearview and they were standing, crammed shoulder to shoulder down the aisle, reaching for me. The next morning I tried to switch buses. The mechanic looked at me like I was nuts. You don't want bus 209? Honestly, no, I said. The mirror's broken, and the electrical's weird, engines sputtering. He rubbed his beard. Yeah, 209 does that, always has. I asked, why does it have a different mirror than the others? He hesitated, then said, that's not our mirror. Never replaced it. Been there since the 90s. Where'd it come from? He didn't answer. I kept driving it because I had no choice, but each day got worse. The kids got quieter. One girl, Bailey, stopped talking completely. Her mom called me, saying she was having nightmares, that she refused to ride the bus anymore because the kids in the back told her she'd vanish like them. When I tried to ask Bailey what she meant, she said, they want the driver now, and she wouldn't get on bus 209 again. Eventually, only 10 students rode. The rest requested route transfers, and the school short-staffed didn't question it. Then, on the last day before winter break, I broke my own rule. I looked into the rear view for too long. And this time, I didn't see kids. I saw myself at the wheel, frozen stiff, eyes black and lifeless, and standing behind me only visible. In the mirror were all the children I'd seen before, but now they were close, inches behind me, and their mouths were open, not in screams, but in impossible, gaping, silent howls, like they were pulling something from me. That's when the lights on the bus cut out. Everything went black. The engine stopped, and I felt breath on my neck. I don't remember much after that. A passing truck driver found me pulled over on the shoulder, doors wide open, standing outside the bus in a snowstorm. I was muttering the same phrase over and over. Don't look in the rear view. Don't look in the rear view. Don't. They took me to the ER, said I had mild hypothermia, no drugs, no alcohol, just shock. I quit the next day. Didn't even collect my last paycheck. I've checked since then and found something strange. The district has retired all its old buses except Bus 209. It still runs, still gets assigned to new drivers, but none stay longer than a month, and each time they file the same vague complaint: strange mirror, electrical glitches, cold spots in the back. One even claimed he saw a student back there, but no one was on board. That driver, he doesn't talk anymore, had a breakdown, they say. Last anyone saw, he was sitting on the edge of the depot lot, staring into a hand mirror he wouldn't put down. If you ever ride a school bus and notice the rear view looks strange, stretched, with a warped kind of shimmer, don't stare. Don't look too long. Don't ask questions. And whatever you do, don't try to see what's in the back, because something might be watching you back. And if it sees you first, it won't let you look away. I didn't believe in curses. Not even when the principal warned me that Route 53 hadn't been used in nearly 15 years. He made it sound like a joke, like some local legend passed around bored bus drivers and janitors. I assumed he was just hazing me, a fresh out of college hire stepping into the school district with idealistic energy and an eagerness to help. So when the transportation supervisor called me in one late August afternoon and asked if I'd consider picking up a few rural students who were too far out for the main routes, I didn't hesitate. Sure, I said. Which route is it? The supervisor didn't answer right away. He just looked down at his clipboard, then, finally, said, Route 53. The room went quiet. A secretary in the corner even paused typing. Asked what was wrong, they just smiled nervously and handed me a faded route sheet paper so old it had yellowed around the edges. Should be simple. 3 stops, out past Miller's Grove. I should have noticed something was off right then. The route sheet wasn't printed, it was handwritten in smudged pencil. The inked time logs from previous years were scratched out, some in red pen, others blacked over entirely. But I shrugged it off. Just rural kids. Just an old route. I got assigned Bus 32, a dusty, gray-blue bird that looked like it hadn't been driven since the Bush administration. No air fresheners, no camera system, just a guttural diesel engine and a groaning brake pedal that squealed like a dying animal every time I pressed it. The mechanic gave me a tight nod as I pulled out. You're really doing Route 53? Yeah, I replied. Why? He squinted, then muttered, just don't miss your turn. The first stop wasn't bad. A boy named Henry, maybe 9, was waiting with his grandmother at the edge of a gravel road near an abandoned farmhouse. He climbed aboard silently and sat near the middle. No hello, no eye contact. Second stop was worse. The road narrowed into deep woods. A girl in a faded blue coat was already standing at the tree line when I arrived. No house, no mailbox, just forest. She got on without a word and walked straight to the back. Third stop was the strangest. It was marked as Wren Hollow Crossroads, but there was no sign, just a cracked stretch of asphalt surrounded by cornfields and a rusted barbed wire fence. A third child boarded, a pale, thin boy with an oversized backpack and bruised-looking eyes. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word, and sat across from the girl. That was it. 3 students. I turned the bus around and headed back toward the main road, retracing my path carefully, checking the rearview. Except the trees didn't end. I drove for 20 minutes, then 30, and the road never changed. No turnoffs, no landmarks, just endless gray trees, like someone had looped a film reel behind the windows. The GPS on my phone showed nothing. No signal, no roads. I turned down the volume on the CB radio. It had started making faint popping noises, like bubble wrap in my ear. Then I checked the kids again. They hadn't moved. None of them. Even when the bus jolted over a pothole, or when I passed the same twisted oak tree I'd seen 5 times before. That's when I realized we weren't going back. We were going somewhere else. I stopped the bus, turned the ignition off. Complete silence. Even the wind outside had died. I stood up and faced the kids. Hey, I said, we're turning around. I think the road's closed up ahead. No reaction. Did you hear me? Still nothing. Their eyes were open, staring forward, not blinking, not breathing. I walked down the aisle, one slow step at a time. Then I saw it. None of them had reflections in the windows. I turned back, toward the front. heart pounding, and there, in the driver's mirror above me, I saw something I hadn't before. A fourth passenger, sitting directly behind my seat. I turned around. The seat was empty. But in the mirror he was still there. A boy with blackened sockets where his eyes should be, wearing a shredded hoodie soaked dark at the collar. He was smiling. I turned back again. Empty. I reached for the radio. Static. I grabbed my phone. Dead. Then I looked outside. The road was gone. In its place was a dirt trail, overgrown with vines and tree roots. And in the distance, barely visible through the fogged windshield, was an old wooden bridge I didn't remember passing. Slats missing, ropes frayed, and nailed to one of the posts was a sign in blocky, hand-painted letters. Now turning back, I had a choice to make. Stay put, or drive forward. Logic said wait, but logic didn't explain the fourth passenger, or why the bus had grown cold enough to fog the glass from the inside, or why, in the corner of my vision, the kids were now smiling wide, unnatural smiles, like puppets pulled by invisible strings. I turned the key, thought the engine sputtered, then caught. The bus lurched forward, toward the bridge, toward whatever waited past the fog. As we crossed, the wooden planks creaked and bent under the weight. Below us, far below, was something moving in the water. Not swimming. Crawling. Pale arms. Hands, with too many fingers. Faces that blinked without eyes. The moment the last set of wheels touched solid ground, the fog swallowed everything behind us. Gone. Just dense black trees ahead, stretching taller than telephone poles, and a new sign. Welcome back. I don't remember how long we drove. Time stretched. The sky didn't change. No sun, no moon, only dim, directionless gray. Then, without warning, the trees parted, and we arrived. Back at the school, same lot, same lines, same buses. Except no one else was there. Just me. And the three children, all staring, all smiling. I turned back, and they were gone. Seats empty, bus silent. I stepped off the bus, unsure of what I'd just experienced. Everything looked normal, until I walked into the building. The school was abandoned. Empty desks, dusty halls, faded posters from years long past, and a calendar on the wall that read, September 2006. I ran outside. Panicked. Checked my phone again. Battery full, but no bars. The date still read today. I turned back toward the lot, and bus 32 was gone. In its place stood a rusted shell of a bus, overgrown with moss. The number plate was missing. Only one word had been etched into the rust by a jagged edge. Yours. I never found my way out. Not really. Eventually, I stumbled back into town. At least I think it was town. Everything was off. The buildings looked right, but people didn't recognize me. The school no longer had a Route 53. No one remembered assigning me. The name of the transportation supervisor was unfamiliar. They said no one by that name had worked there in decades. And when I described the 3 students I'd picked up, they all matched kids who had gone missing 15 years ago. All on the same day. All last seen, waiting for a bus that never came. I live in a different state now. No one hires me to drive anymore. I don't blame them, but sometimes I still see it, out of the corner of my eye, on long foggy roads, a bus just like the one I drove. Sometimes it's parked. Sometimes it's moving, but always it's empty, except for the mirror, which still shows for passengers, waiting and smiling. And if you ever see it too, if you ever pass an empty gray bus on a road that doesn't appear on maps, don't follow it. Because once you're on Route 53 you don't come back. I started driving for the district the year after my wife died. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, just something to keep me busy in the early mornings, give me a sense of schedule again. My daughter had just left for college. The house was too quiet, the days too long, and the silence at night was unbearable. Driving a school bus seemed simple. The route was calm, the kids were fine, no major behavior issues, no long highway stretches. Just a loop through a small mountain town, drop off at the elementary school, and then back to the depot. But on Monday, November 6th, things changed. That was the first day I saw the girl in the yellow jacket. She was standing at the edge of a cul-de-sac that wasn't even on my route. I was already running a couple minutes early, so I figured I'd loop around once to waste some time. That's when I saw her, maybe 8 years old, pale skin, straight black hair down to her shoulders, and this bright yellow coat zipped all the way up to her chin. She didn't wave, She didn't smile, just stood perfectly still with her backpack hugged to her chest. I slowed, opened the door, and leaned out. Hey there, you new to the route? She just nodded once and climbed aboard without saying a word. Quiet kid, I thought. She took a seat behind the emergency exit, the one that always rattled when I made sharp turns. I made a mental note to ask dispatch about new and release when I got back. But when I checked the roster later that morning, her name wasn't on it. No new students had registered. No parents had called. No one knew anything about a girl matching that description. So I asked the other drivers if they'd seen her. They looked confused. Yellow jacket. One said, "Nah, man. Nobody new on that side of town. That cul-de-sac's empty has been since the rock slide 3 years ago." I must have looked at him funny, because he added, "You must have picked up the wrong kid. Double check tomorrow." I planned to, but the next morning, she was there again. Same time, same spot, same blank stare. Only this time, her jacket was soaked, dripping actually, but the skies were clear, had been all night, no dew, no puddles, no broken sprinklers. I asked if she was okay. She didn't respond, just walked down the aisle and sat in the exact same seat as before. That was when I noticed something else. No one else on the bus even looked at her, not once. I asked a few of the other kids later that morning if they knew the new girl, but none of them had seen her. One boy even looked at me like I was insane and said, "There's no girl in a yellow jacket, mister." The third morning was when I stopped, thinking I was imagining things. Because this time, when she boarded, her eyes were different, not bigger or darker. Just wrong, like they'd been painted on, like she wasn't seeing me, but looking through me. And when she passed me, I felt it. Not wind, not cold. Wait, like the air thickened as she passed. I tried to keep calm, but by now, I was obsessed. I went back and checked the dashcam footage that afternoon, scrolled back to the time she boarded. There, I was pulling to a stop, the door opening. Me turning and saying something. But the steps were empty. The aisle was clear. No sign of the girl. I fast-forwarded, checked every frame. Nothing. Except at the 13:07 mark, just for a single second to flicker, a blurry shape in the back seat, too fast to catch unless you paused it. Exactly right. I zoomed in, and I swear to God, I saw her face, but it was upside down and smiling. That night, I didn't sleep. Just stared out the window, listening. Waiting. And I heard it. At 3:26 a.m. A hiss of air breaks outside my house. I ran to the porch. There, across the street under the flickering lamppost, sat Bust, to Jablus my bus. The one I drove. Door open, engine humming. And in the back row, barely visible through the fogged-up glass, her, sitting exactly where she always sat, staring forward. I blinked and it was gone. No bus, no sound, no nothing. Just a silent road and an empty streetlight buzzing above. I tried to quit, walked into the office the next morning, pale, exhausted, sweating through my shirt, and told them I was done. But the supervisor just looked confused. "You can't quit," she said. "You're not on staff anymore." "What are you talking about?" She flipped through a binder. "You retired 4 years ago, Jerry, after your heart attack." I laughed at first. Thought she was messing with me, but then I looked on her desk. There was a picture of us, her and I, from years ago. Back when I was training her, she looked the same. IDIDN single quotes T. Older. Dead I. And in the photo, behind us in the lot, I saw it, the yellow jacket. Blurry. In the background. Watching. I left the office in a daze. Everything was wrong. People didn't recognize me. My key didn't fit my car. And when I finally walked home, it wasn't my home anymore. Different paint, different curtains. Different mailbox. Someone else lived there now. They didn't even speak English. Didn't know the name Jerry. Didn't know anything about a school bus driver dying behind the wheel in 2021. So now, I wander. I live in motels. I eat when I remember. But every morning, at exactly 7:05, I feel it. The rumble of wheels, the hiss of doors, and I see her waiting in that seat. Staring. Smiling. And every day, she gets closer. One row closer. One seat closer. I know what happens when she reaches the front, but I don't want to find out, so I keep moving, keep hiding, keep not sleeping, because she's not a ghost. She's worse. She's a memory that never belonged to me. She's a passenger who never needed a ride, and now I'm the one who's boarded her bus. If you ever drive a school bus and you see her waiting, don't stop, don't talk, don't even look, because once she's on board, she doesn't leave.